Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, on this beautiful day, a day that I am honored and blessed to be hosting a friend of mine for many, many years. Without distorting anything or mispronouncing anything, my friend Nancy, please tell our viewers who is Nancy Colier.
Well, I'm delighted to be here. You, my old friend, we were just laughing that we are at least a day older since we first met, hopefully a bit wiser along the way, and whatever sort of journey we've been on, that we learn from it and become better versions of ourselves. Who is Nancy Colier? I always wrestle with that question because I think anything that we name really who we are, just roles we play and accomplishments that we've achieved and so on. And what we are is much more than that. But I will say what I do. That's the best I can say. But right now I am a psychotherapist. I am an interfaith minister. I work with people in psychology and psychotherapy and spiritual inquiry. I write for Psychology Today, and I give workshops around the country on, right now, whatever book I have just finished. And right now that's The Emotionally Exhausted Woman. So helping women, and all, not just women, but all genders and non-genders with living a more authentic life, living a life that feels like the one we were put on the earth to live. So trying to step out again from some of our roles, our conditioning and thought patterns, and live something that feels true. So I'm out there on the road as a thought leader, doing that, whatever that means, doing that.
And the leader you are, you've done it for so many years. For the context of our viewers who are meeting you for the first time and who I would like for them to get to know you even better, please share where you were born, how you were raised, and where you live now.
I was born in Manhattan, and I was raised actually in the Buddhist tradition by two a psychologist and a psychiatrist. Scary enough.
I didn't know that.
Yes, and with a lot of artists around me. My family is mostly artists, a lot of filmmakers and poets and things like that. So a lot of kind of New York intellectual scene, a lot of psychologists, and a lot of thinking everywhere. I had to do a lot of work to unravel a lot of the boxes that being raised in a psychological mold created. And anyway, lived in many different places around the country, traveled a lot, and have returned and am raising my family in Manhattan, of all places. Endlessly searching for another place to live. California, always on the agenda. Come home to New York again and again and seem, I don't know, something very sticky for me about this place, as difficult as it is. So raising two wonderful daughters, one in college, one not yet, and a lovely husband and a dog, and am so blessed and so lucky, and also deep belief in going out and making the life that you want to happen. So it's a partnership with the universe is how I see it, but came from a family of very spiritual people. And I am really grateful for that. There was always a sense of meaning coming mostly that part came from my mom, of things matter and there's joy in tiny moments, and all that yummy stuff stayed with me.
Wonderful. See, I brought you here so our listeners can learn, relearn, and unlearn things. And here I am learning things about you. So glad you are here. For many years, Nancy, you were an athlete, of which you still are, and you were an equestrian.
Yes, I was for many years. Equestrian.
Many years. A mammal with another mammal together.
Yes.
One listens to the other, and goes where the other goes. That takes a lot of discipline, a lot of patience, and definitely you have the discipline it takes. How did you transition from an equestrian to the work you do now?
Wow, that's a long journey. I grew up riding, always loved riding. One of those girls that just was taken, and became a very serious equestrian, riding on the circuit, the A circuit in the hunters and jumpers. And what started to really interest me over time, Jackson, was what makes people. I'm really competitive, always have been.
Yes.
When I play Monopoly with my daughter, I don't let her win. And, I have a lot of type A in me. And so I was really fascinated by what made an athlete win versus an athlete that didn't win. And because they could have the same physical skill, but what was the mindset that determined that? And that the person could walk in the ring and bring out their best ride when they were in the ring, and the next person who had just as much skill would collapse. I became really fascinated by states of mind that created allowed your great potential to come forward. And then I went back to school in mostly sports psychology for performance and what it was. And, most of the work with athletes is cognitive. So it's kind of getting in a mindset. And that was really interesting, and creating a sort of, no negative thoughts, winning mentality. But over time, I think I got more interested in the aspect of being an athlete in the flow state. And that state where the separate self disappears and there is just the experience arising. So you're not the one riding the horse over the jumps. Riding is happening and you've disappeared and there is no more time. And that state became so fascinating to me. And how do we access that? Because to me, that's a state also of deep spirituality.
Exactly. Yes.
And whatever takes us there, I don't care your path there. For me, the initial path there was through sport. Total presence, total and utter presence, and joy, because there's no separate self to get in the way. And so then I began a path towards actually psychology, paradoxically, after having done so much work to get away from psychology, but to understand sort of a spiritual psychology. We come back to our roots, I suppose. Yes. And I got really interested in awareness practices and non-duality, and not just through sport, but what is this that is bigger than our thoughts? What is it that is larger than our feelings? This awareness itself that we are. And so, and then I started working with people in my office with, just private patients, and just found the mind so fascinating. And then getting distance from the mind and realizing that we're not the mind. It's like, that was the most interesting process I could possibly endeavor. And then wanting to go deeper into becoming an interfaith minister. So understanding the traditions and what are some other paths to this non-separateness that I had originally found, in a saddle. Yes. And writing has always been a part of my life. I write because I have to. It's how I process things. It's how I make sense of things. I have to write about it, and then I start to understand it and hold it. And so as I went, I wrote more and more and started giving workshops. And to some degree, I'm so lucky, Jackson, because I am an incredibly hard worker and I do my part, but I will say that the universe has allowed me to just flow down the river. And I've never had resistance, and it's taken me where I need to go. So I do exactly what I love. I do what I love.
And that is a tweetable moment. Choose to do what you love. When you do that, you wake up every day happy to do it. Those of you who don't believe it, look what our friend Nancy, happy doing what she loves.
You know, somebody just asked me, it's funny, I was doing a podcast and he said, and he didn't ask me ahead, and, you know, he hadn't sent any questions, which is great. And he said, what do you think creates joy? And just, I thought it was a great question, always a great question. It sometimes depends on your mood, what you say. But
Right.
on that day, I said, it was yesterday, I said, I think what creates joy is stop fighting with the present moment, stop resisting life as it is. The second is that we delight in small things, right? We notice when we appreciate, and we just stop for a moment and appreciate that warm breeze, or appreciate that strawberry, or appreciate our daughter's smile, or whatever it is. But we notice, we really tune in. And the third one was that we get up in the morning and we do things that we like to do. I mean, you know, that's why they pay me the big bucks, because I say such, you know, strange and odd things. But fill your days with things you like to do.
Things you like to do. So when you are talking about where you live, you mentioned Manhattan, and I want to make sure that people understand that's Manhattan, New York, in the big city. We share that. We both love New York.
Yes.
You have written several books, which we'll talk about. I love that. In the fall, while I'm here at Harvard, I'm actually going to go to Divinity School at Harvard and audit one of their classes.
So great.
You have immersed yourself in learning the spirituality. And one aspect I would like you to expound a little bit more is Eastern spirituality. Many people might not understand it. I have so many listeners in Uganda, young people, young girls and women you know and you help to raise who are now adults. What is Eastern spirituality?
Well, that's a gigantic container. So I wouldn't dare. I wouldn't dare. Particularly you at Harvard Divinity School, would I not dare? But I would say that my experience with primarily Buddhism, Hinduism, and non-duality is what we talked about before, which is the recognition that this whole construction of an I, of me, of all my thoughts, my beliefs, my opinions, my possessions, my accomplishments, that none of it is me.
Okay.
And this recognition of one's true nature, not only as good, I mean, that's what I love about Buddhism, is that we are inherently good. And we're born good and we die good, but that our basic goodness is this vast emptiness and also fullness, empty of anything. So people confuse nothing with it's really no thing. It's not a thing. It's the place we're looking from, which includes everything, even this little embodied self we think we are. But at the base of Eastern spirituality, of what I've taken from it over all these decades, is we're not just this. We're not just this. And there is something vast within which all of this appears. And so it's a process of re-identifying with the ocean rather than the raindrop. And that is a very sort of esoteric way of saying rediscovering who we really are, which is basic goodness, kindness, love, and vastness that is unnameable.
That's very good. Thank you for clearing that. I'm going to move into deeper subjects that you've covered in your books, but also that I know you as a friend, as the person you care about. We both care about women empowerment. You've recently written a book on exhausted woman. And with our work we've done with Inyaka for many years, 20,000 women now, I look in their eyes and Nancy, they are exhausted. Number one, they're exhausted because of years they have gone through. Number two, these are women who have all grown around patriarchal. They've gone through so much that we cannot even begin to describe. Or a woman who's seated in Nyakaje's village right now, or their grandchild is listening, what 2 or 3 things do they need to know and how they can go about relieving part of that exhaustion?
Well, in the emotionally exhausted woman, and I know that women in Uganda are struggling with, some very practical boots on the ground issues that perhaps the woman at Harvard is not. And yet, what we all are conditioned in as women is that our value lies in taking care of others. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing wrong with taking care of others, but the difficulty comes when that's all that we're allowed. And that in order to feel valuable, in order to feel worthy, that's the only aspect of ourselves that we're allowed to express. And, we know very early on that what makes us emotionally safe is to be liked. And life becomes very much about this sort of unending drive to be liked. And it comes at great cost to our authenticity, to our voice, to our power, to our vitality. And so much so that we, so many women, by the time they're in their 3rd or 4th decade, usually for sure by their 5th, they don't even know anymore what they want and need. They don't even know who they are other than who they are in their roles, who they are to and for everyone else. And it leads to a deep fatigue, a burnout, because we've disconnected from our power source, which is ourselves. And so it is not our fault. It is the way we've learned to be emotionally safe, right? The new version of, the animal, when the animal got cut off from the herd, they were left behind to die. Well, now that's an emotional possible rejection that we risk if we are not what everyone wants us to be. And as modern women, we know very clearly who's wanted and who's not, who's the perfect woman, nice, sweet, giving, available, selfless, all of these sorts of things, not too powerful, not too successful, pretty, all these things, and certainly not selfish, aggressive, difficult, a diva, a prima donna. We know the list. We don't need to go through them too much. Needy, definitely don't be needy. But we've spent our lives, sort of putting ourselves into boxes and apologizing and adjusting our truth and fitting into something that will not be rejected and left behind by the herd. So I look at a lot of the deeper reasons that we are so emotionally fatigued and are so afraid to own our own truth because of the possible consequences. And what we've been offered, as women is at least in the States, is pampering, go get a spa day. Has nothing to do with why we're exhausted. And it's lovely and it'll help you for half an hour or so, but none of these things heal us. So what I'm teaching women to do is to offer themselves a deeper kind of self-care, which is to befriend their own truth, to drop into their own experience, to get to know themselves in a more authentic way that's not about what I can offer someone else. And it requires going into our core beliefs and going into what we've done with our own needs and how we've tucked them away and ignored them. And now we don't even know where to go looking for them anymore. And so I do a deep dive into the real causes of our depletion, and then invite women and give women the courage to stand in their own shoes, to be on their own team, to speak what's true and be willing to risk the consequences and shake up the patriarchy. And it's, we're going to lose some of the cash and prizes. There's no way around it. But when we get that feeling of, I will not abandon myself, I stand in my truth, I own my own power, my own wants and needs, and the whole miracle and catastrophe that I am. We've been taught that only certain parts of ourselves are welcome and everything else we have to fix or do away with, or we're to blame for it, right? But this is a different system where we own the whole of us, like Rumi's guest house. Everything is welcome. So it's a real paradigm shift in what safety means, that it's not about being likable and figuring out who to be. It's about being real.
That is well elaborated, Nancy. So in this age of information overload, a woman is seated now listening and going, I like what Nancy just said. Where do I begin? Do they find a podcast? Should they look for a therapist, psychologist in their area?
Well, they can start by buying the book. Yes. Buy the book.
There we go. I like
Emotionally Exhausted Woman.
Yes.
And then you start to practice by, first of all, you have to become aware. You have to become aware of all the ways you're giving yourself away, all the ways you're twisting and turning and doing all of these things to make the other person okay, right? And then we start, and I lay it out, there's really a map about how we come into ourselves and take that risk. Mm-hmm. To be real again. And it starts with, awareness, and then it starts with baby steps, moving from a life of should to a life of want. It means starting to not take the blame for everything wrong in our lives, to not have to fix everything wrong in our lives, to take responsibility for our truth, but not the results of that. And to start to tell the truth, and then to start to welcome, as I said, the miracle and catastrophe, the whole of you, not just selective parts. So there's a series of 5 steps where, we really, in baby steps, learn to unlearn the system that we thought kept us safe, that abandoning ourselves was the only way to take care of ourselves. We unlearn that. And I walk you through a lot of it in the book.
Very good. And the steps you highlight in the book are not specific to women. It's for all human beings. But the title is Emotionally Exhausted Woman. And you have it in so many places. It is on Amazon. You can go through it through your website, nancycolier.com. You can go through
one L.
Oh, nancy.com?
No, nancycolier.com with one L. Everybody spells my name with 2 L's, and they don't get it.
Ladies and gentlemen, don't put 2 arrows. You will go somewhere else. We want you to land to the right website, Nancy Colier, 1 L. It will be under in the comments when we post this video. And when we post this video, it's going to be on YouTube. And you and I have had many conversations about social media, LinkedIn, YouTube.
Yes, we have. I wrote a book about that too, called The Power of Off.
So digitalization age, Juliet and Gretchen, the Nicolases, Nora, Natalia, and Tessas, all the stuff they have is on their hands right here on this thing. As we grow in this digital age, how do we get our children, especially teenagers, to go back to that area where they can balance? How do they hit the balance between the digital age, analog, and basic human skills? You have seated on the dining table, put your phone away. You don't have to eat every toilet paper you see in the entire Manhattan. But how do we help the teenagers? Julia is in Colorado, Nicholas is in New York. We are not there to see how they are seated on the table, but they were both raised right. Please give advice, because we have listeners who are the same age, or parents who have the same age children.
In The Power of Off, the book I wrote about that we've had many conversations about. And don't forget the one in between, Can't Stop Thinking, which is about anxiety and worry and our overthinking, which comes in part as a result of all of this digital chaos. But this question is such an important one about how can we save our children? I hate to use that word, but what I have come to know is life is always changing, and our way is no longer the way.
That's true.
And so on my end, I fought and fought and fought with the fact that their whole social world goes on in the ether, and that we know the loss of that. We know how thinking goes down the drain. We know how patience, and we know how attention, and we know how the richness of sitting with another human being is lost. And we know all that they're losing. They don't. So they are building a world that is just radically different than ours, right? And what I would say with people with teenagers is we have to model, and we've talked about this, model non-addictive tech behavior, because we have a lot of parents who, come to me and talk to me about how do I teach my child, and I watch them with their child and they're on the phone all the time. So the first thing is, if we don't walk it, there's nothing. But again, we have to take baby steps, which is do what we can do when we have them, which is, as you said, no phones at meals.
Yes.
Your phone goes away from you at 9:00 at night, and then you have 2 hours to come down.
No phones on the meal. Model it as a parent before you tell the children not to do it.
Absolutely. You have to walk the walk. And also, what I would say is we do is get your kids into activities that are outside the digital world. Get them into sports, get them out with nature, get them in places where it's not just us hammering at them that, you want to be with people, you're losing the power to think, you can't sit with the problem, you need immediate answers, you just go to Google, now you use a bot. They don't care about any of that. They're just annoyed. Get them in places where they experience being with friends or relatives phone free, so they know that richness themselves. Otherwise, we're just talking a talk that it's not their experience.
Exactly.
So really important to make sure they read on the page, not just on their screens, and that they experience activities, send them on trips and to camps where no tech is allowed. So they have real friendships. Yes. And get accustomed to the beautiful awkwardness that it is to be with another human being shoulder to shoulder, right? Yeah. And to take a walk. I always tell my daughter, when you take the dog out, you don't take the phone. You don't need the phone. It's right here, right? Experience 10 minutes a day where you're not reachable and be with yourself. Right? So these sorts of little ways that we just incorporated, and an acceptance that this is bigger than you and I, Jackson.
It's bigger than you and I. We know we had these conversations before COVID. Then COVID came. What we are telling kids to separate from became their learning tools. Now the world said, go on your phone, download your app, test COVID on your phone, order food on the phone. And now we have to kind of again rewind into getting back in nature, into getting with people. I know we don't have much time, Nancy, but the important question we have asked everybody I have talked to on this TJK One-on-One is, what advice would you give your younger self?
Oh, what a beautiful question. And it's funny because it changes every day, right? But I suppose today I would tell my younger self, I think I would tell her that the answer is not outside of you.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
You know, I spent a lot of decades chasing a different experience, chasing accomplishments, chasing something else. And God, after all that time, I found out that my own well-being, my own home was inside. You know, it reminds me of this story. I love this story of a young buck who early on in her life in the forest smells perfume, and she spends her entire life chasing that scent everywhere she goes, trying to find that scent. And then one day she's hit by a hunter's arrow in her flank, and as she lays there dying, always makes me weepy, but as she lays there dying, she smells that aroma coming from inside her. And I would tell my younger self that you are the destination.
You are the destination. So embrace who you are. The answers are within all of us. Thank you, Nancy. Please, before you leave, do me a favor and list those books. Books you have written, and then you will also share the website once again.
Sure.
YouTube channel, your social media handles, which will all be listed and clickable. So our listeners can click, share, can put off their phones, go walk their dogs, and come back and watch some more of Nancy Colier.
Sure. The latest book is The Emotionally Exhausted Woman. And as we said, it's available everywhere, Amazon, blah, blah, blah. The book before that people are really also just really get so much feedback on is Can't Stop Thinking. It's about freeing ourselves from anxiety and constant rumination. And then The Power of Off, and Inviting a Monkey to Tea, and Getting Out of Your Own Way. So there is the full, and they're all available on Amazon, and they are all available. You can go to my website as well, nancycolier.com, and at @NCollier, and you'll find me. But if anybody also picks up a book and reads it, I love to interact. So reach out to me through the website, and let's talk about what's changing in you because of the books.
Wonderful. Men and women, all humans around the world. Yeah. And hopefully the next book you write, you get on a tour to Uganda so you can reach our rural areas where so much work you invested earlier on in growing the Nyaka organization, working with you. You can get there one day. Any next book on the horizon, or still thinking about it?
There is a book on the horizon, but I'm very mindful of keeping it until it's ready. Otherwise, you give it away and it dilutes.
When that comes out, we'll host you once again. Thank you, my friend.
My pleasure.
Upon you. You continue to be an inspiration from
you as well.
When I met you to this day, and you always be.
See you soon.
Namaste.
Namaste.